Hey guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and boy, do I have a special guest for you today, my friend, Beverly Jones. Welcome to the show.
Well, I'm so excited to be here.
Well, it's so fun to have you. And you guys, for those of you that have watched our shows or listened to our shows in the past, you'll know that the Greatness Machine, we're about two things: people who are living their passions and those who are creating greatness in the world. And Beverly is neither short of passion or greatness. So I'm so excited to have her here. Beverly, do you mind if I give a little bit of background on how we met one another?
No, go ahead, please.
So about a year ago, I came out with my book, The Core Value Equation, and I had a PR team that went out there and really went out looking for people that were doing some great things in the world of broadcasting, and we got hooked up with an NPR syndicate. And the host of the show was Beverly herself, and the name of the show is Jazzed About Work. And so I got to be on her show. It was actually my first time on NPR, and we had a great conversation all about my book, The Core Value Equation. Got to know her and her team, and really got to just have a down and dirty conversation around, what are people doing to, build better places at work. And, I was really honored to be a part of that conversation with you, Beverly. It was really nice to meet you then. And you so graciously reached out to me when you had your book come out. And so we're here today to talk about Beverly and her book. So I'm so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, we did have a good time talking. And in fact, I will tell you the truth. When I started reaching out to other podcasts and people I come to know along the way, you were the first person I got in touch with because we had such a lively conversation. And, nobody wants to hear kind of boring, canned descriptions of a book. They want to hear what's really going on in the world and with the people who are talking. So I thought this is a good way to launch my discussion of the book.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad to hear you say that, and I felt exactly the same way. And what we're going to be talking about today is about Beverly's new book, Find Your Happy at Work. Beverly, do you mind if I give a little bit of background on you to the audience, just for a second here?
No, go ahead, please.
So you guys, Beverly Jones, she works with leaders to bring new productivity to their teams, and she helps professionals to grow and thrive in their careers. Her work often focuses on building resilience, enhancing performance, managing time and energy, improving communications, navigating transitions and difficult situations, and also learning to flourish at work and in life. Her new book is Find Your Happy at Work. And she's doing this through her organization, Clearways Consulting. And she's working with organizations and individuals. And like I mentioned earlier, she does the Jazzed About Work show on NPR. And you're located right outside DC doing that. Is that correct?
That's right. We have a place in the city, but for the last couple of years, we've been hanging out near the entrance to Shenandoah National Park. So I'm way out in the country right now.
Oh, it's amazing. So yeah. So, if you don't mind, I always like when I bring guests on the show to talk about, what got you here is typically a more interesting story than why you're here now. But yeah, I want to hear about how did you get into this world of, take us kind of back through your career. What got you into this work of helping organizations and is this your first book, by the way?
No, it's not. It's my second book. The first one was Think Like an Entrepreneur, Act Like a CEO.
Oh, I
But
love it.
I have been playing with some of these issues. And when I say playing, I mean experimenting and trying new things, but caring deeply about them for a very long time. Going back to college, I was a journalism student and a writer, and I worked at the paper and the radio station, all of those things. But I became very upset about the limited opportunities for women in journalism and in everything else professionally. So I started using whatever way I could to raise concern about it, and it ended up with the president of the university hiring me as his assistant, and for the purpose of encouraging new opportunities for women and people of color. So that goes back a long time of my thinking about relationships with work and how you get things done. And along the way, it became apparent there were no women in the MBA program at Ohio University. So in addition to working for the president, I became the first woman in the MBA program. And then I went off to law school, and then I was an executive, and I've done lots of things. Nowadays, I'm an entrepreneur and I work with a bunch of companies. But all along the way, what I've been passionate about is how is it that people can have work that's really meaningful and makes a contribution and changes the world and makes them happy and all of those things, and still have lives that are happy. So it's things I've been thinking about for a long time. But now, oh my gosh, I think there's so much more awareness of how miserable work can be and how wonderful it can be. And a lot of us are trying to figure out how we're going to do it going forward. I mean, after the last few months, even people who were pretty happy before are thinking, I could do even better. So this has been a long, strange journey for me, and I've had a lot of adventures along the way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, and I'm just thinking, you're making me think of how I've always approached this. I think I do think that there are some leaders that get this naturally, that they get, and I think those are probably the better leaders. Sorry if you're not a better leader, but if it's I always look at the job of leaders to meet people where they're at and elevate them beyond their abilities, right, and help them.
You're exactly right, and your idea of core values and finding alignment with values is a really big part of it. But not everybody is finds that easy. So it can be a long process to help people um, focus on the other people around them.
Yeah, there's this idea of servant leadership, right? Which is being that selflessness, putting people ahead of themselves. And I think that what's happening now is we're moving away from this command and control type of
Hmm.
leadership style that maybe was really popular, 10, 20, 30 years ago. When the Jack Welches of the world would cut to the bottom 10% of the population in their organization every year. And I get it. I grew up in a business which was a banking business where you still have a lot of that command and control structure. And but on the other end of that spectrum is you have this movement towards conscious leadership,
Hmm.
this idea of more holistic leadership. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on, as we transition in the world right now. And I think that's what's happening, is we have this friction around the old command and control, which really was kind of got the modern businesses to where they're at over the last 30, 40 years, to now this evolution into conscious leadership, which is really people showing up, and it's not just about coming and punching in the clock and then making enough money and then enjoying your life when you leave work. It's around self-actualization and being a part of something greater than yourself and pouring into your career. I view that as a more holistic, conscious type of leadership. What are you seeing, and what are your thoughts around these topics?
Well, I think one of the things that is happening is that if you look at research, and there's a lot of it, and you look at productivity and all of these things that matter to businesses, workers who are happier are more creative. They get along better. They get along better with clients. They're more innovative. There are tremendous benefits to having workers who are finding meaning and joy in their lives. So one of the reasons all of this is occurring is not just the awful experience we've shared in the last year or two, making a lot of people more compassionate, but it's an awareness that people who are finding meaning and enjoyment every day are going to do better, and those are the kind of people you want. I think part of the problem that happens is that it's very hard to manage people to be um, happier in their work, be more productive in their work, if you're not taking care of your own well-being. And one of the things that happens, I talk to a lot of leaders in my coaching work. They get so stressed. They're trying so hard. They're meaning to do so much. They really care, but they're neglecting themselves. They're working marathons, not spurts. They're not thinking about their own well-being. They don't get any exercise. They don't have much variety in their life because they're working so long. So if the leader is approaching work as a grind and they'll be happy later, they're not able to inspire um, the best work, the happiest workers. You have to take care of yourself as part of leadership, I think.
Yeah, what's that saying? It's like you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, right?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
making the analogy towards an airplane crash, right? But so yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think that, I don't know, I think a lot of this comes from the mentality. I mean, I grew up with a family that was, my mom's parents were from the Great Depression, and she grew up in a steel mill town outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
So you have this hardworking mentality from not even 100 years ago. And, my she's a baby boomer. My dad came from the Middle East. He was not born in this country, and he was born in 1939 in Iran. And I always joke that that's like being born in 1889 in the United States. So I grew up in an environment where there was more of a scarcity mentality, where it was, you got to work hard. And I think a lot of the leaders, if you look at people in their 50s and 60s and maybe even 40s, these are people that are running most of the companies in the United States right now. Like, there are obviously younger leaders coming up, but if you look at the majority of CEOs of Fortune 1000 companies, they're, unfortunately they're men, but they're men in their 50s and 60s. They were brought up, with that being the ethos of the times. And
that's absolutely right. And there's a lot to be said about throwing yourself into work. But I think working hard, maybe we need another word. It's working intensely. Working intensely is good, but working intensely hour after hour after hour until it's painful and you're no longer productive, that's not good. So one of the things that I trying to do with this book is talk to people to develop an awareness about their relationship with work. When things are going really well, when there's a flow, when you're having a conversation and you're really cooking, when things are going well, it's fun. And it's fun because you're working hard. Like, if you're a tennis player and you play tennis, you're having the best time when you're totally into it, right? And it's the same with work. It's working intensely. It's putting everything there. It's being totally present in what you're doing and aware of everything that's going around. But you can't operate like that. Human beings are not constructed to operate like that 12 hours in a row. So you have to learn to build variety, to take breaks, to learn new things, to engage with other people. You've got to break up the day so that you're not just grinding away the way your mother taught you. You've got to be smarter, and you get more done, and life is richer, and you notice you're more creative if you're building in some breaks and some variety in your day.
Are you so what was the motivation for you to write the book Find Your Happy at Work?
Well, I started it a few years ago, and I work with a lot of people. My clients tend to be leaders in large organizations, sometimes professionals who are making transitions, but I do a lot of nonprofit work. I'm connected with the university and so forth. So what I noticed was that more junior people kind of feel like, ah, they're at the mercy of the man. Nobody cares about them. They're feeling like they need guidance and they're frustrated. But the leaders I talk to all feel like they're compassionate. They seem to care greatly. They're not taking care of themselves because they want to take care of other people. It seemed like there was a big disconnect. And what I wanted to do is get at the puzzle of how you can um, promote your own well-being and creativity and take care of other people without being in a kind of a perpetual state of burnout. How can you help leaders kind of relax into caring, and partly by taking care of themselves? And how can you individually, each of us, take care of ourselves and do better? So that's what I started with. But then after I started writing, along came the pandemic. And all of a sudden, it was just a different experience. We saw lots of people, I think, really rising to the occasion and doing amazing work and understanding how work can be meaningful in a way they hadn't even realized, but at the same time getting exhausted. So then, instead of thinking of really a more narrow group, the kind of knowledge workers I work with, lawyers and that kind of leader, it looked to me like, wow, everything is changing. There's a lot of misery around, and yet people are pausing and saying, we're not going to put up with this miserable life anymore. That maybe one of the things that's going to come out of this period is an awareness that we can take control of our careers and take care of ourselves and flourish, um, without that scarcity mindset you mentioned. If you have a mindset of abundance and a determination to throw yourself into work with the same enthusiasm you throw yourself into play, maybe you can do it all. You can take care of other people. You can acknowledge your values. You can enjoy the expertise you bring to work and be successful and happy at the same time. That's what I think people are looking for now.
Yeah, no, I think it kind of goes back to the earlier statement I made, which is we're in this realm of conscious leadership. That's people are understanding that. It's funny. I'm going to interrupt myself. You know, I have always been a CEO of a business. This is the first time in my career that I'm actually outside of. I mean, I guess I'm a CEO, but I have a small
Mhm.
team now as opposed to building a bigger company, and I'm doing consulting and advisory work. And the back when I was CEO of my last company, and it was a good sized company. We had almost 1,000 employees at one point. Um, I was helping a friend of a friend build his core values for his company. This is like now I do it where I actually help companies, like they'll pay me, but back then it
Mhm.
was like just I think he paid me, but I wasn't doing that for a living. It was more of like just a project for fun. And I asked the CEO of this company, Harvard Business School grad, uh, management consulting company in the West Coast, and I said, we're doing his core values, and he said, well, you want my business core values, my personal core values?
Ah.
And I laughed. I said, well, I said they're no different. They just reflect the way you use them is different. Like it's not like you put on a mask and show up to work and you're this different person for 8 or 10 hours. You might leverage your values differently, but no one can do that consistently. I know some people do. Some people say, no, Darius, I'm different at work. And I'd say, no, you might pretend to be different sometimes. And I think that the people see through inauthenticity like very easily,
Yeah.
but the reality is like, you are who you are as a human being. Like, and there's a quote I love, which is how you are anywhere is how you are everywhere. Like we can kind of change it up a little bit when if I'm in the South, I'm going to behave differently than if I'm in New York City. And maybe I'm behaving a little bit differently when I'm in the Midwest, but I'm still Darius. Like, I might watch my language a little more when I'm in the Bible Belt, but, that's just the reality of, being more of a chameleon so that people can, appreciate you and you're not throwing up roadblocks. But how do you think that people can really, I guess the word I'm looking for is how can they show up with that abundance mentality? Like, I don't think it's a switch you just turn on. Like,
No.
what are your thoughts around how people can do that more easily?
Well, let's see. There are a couple of ways that I get into this in the book. There really are a lot of things that you can do to change your mindset, to change your attitude to being a growth mindset. And a lot of it starts with how you manage the voice in your head, how you manage your own dialogue. If you're, say, you're dealing with somebody who is um, driving you crazy, and you're saying to yourself, "Oh, I can't stand this. This person's ruining my life," on and on and on. If you pause and notice, it's not so much the other person sometimes, it's what you're saying, it's your interpretation. It may be the person isn't even thinking about you, it's their stuff, but you're interpreting kind of a bad things happening at work as being about you. And if what you say is, this person is difficult to deal with, they may be having some trouble, but here's my plan. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to go around it. As soon as you focus on the future, focus on your plan, and stop beating yourself up or complaining in your own head, um, you can make a very fast change. But lots of other things that you can do is one thing I have people talk about is what I call the engagement triangle. I work on it with my clients, and I work with leaders, um, both as leaders and as individuals, because as you say, everybody's just one person, and that is that what really tends to shape us, our attitude and how happy we're feeling at work, tends to come down to three things very often. One is values. It's the purpose. It's your core values and how they relate to the situation around you. Sometimes the job isn't a great job, but your purpose is to feed your family, to put yourself through grad school, all of those things. So that is one of the things. The other two things that I think really matter are how you're impacting and engaging with other people. If you have a job that's hard or a little boring or it's not perfectly satisfying, but you're having impact on other people. You're engaging in other people. You're getting to meet other people. Um, you can find a lot more joy by focusing on that. So, another set of things you can do relate to building your network, getting along more easily, all of those kind of things. And then there is a joy and expertise. And when you're starting out in just about anything, it can be kind of really exciting at the very beginning and then get very dull because it doesn't start to get exciting again until you build expertise. So if you manage your work in such a way, you break it up into pieces and you kind of celebrate along the way and you notice your growth, finding joy in your expertise, changing your processes, making them more interesting, trying to learn something new every day. There's a whole lot you can do about your processes and activities in your work. So those kind of three things, and looking at the triangle, and then if you're the leader, looking at your people and seeing, kind of talking through them, getting a sense of what they want. That's a way to, in an organization, to get alignment. And you can do it for yourself if you're just trying to figure out, why do I feel so miserable? Kind of, I have a bunch of questions for each of those points. And you can figure out, okay, maybe I'm not having enough contact with people. And so then you look at things you can do to engage in new ways.
I love that. You're making me think of, and we were talking about the engagement triangle. One of my favorite tools is Gallup's Q12 engagement findings. And you made me think of, I just pulled it up actually while earlier in the show. But there's a question number 5, which is, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. And I conduct this with, I do a lot of work with CEOs. My clients are mostly CEOs of pretty good sized companies. And I do it. I integrate the Q12 into a quarterly assessment of the organization. I do like engagement, loyalty, and productivity questionnaire an anonymous questionnaire that I call it the full body scan that I've kind of built over the years. And one of things I've noticed, no matter how, like, for companies that actually like are really trying, and not every, like, some companies, they're just all about the bottom line and they don't care how they get there, right? And that, I think those are far and few between. I think most people, especially more entrepreneurial organizations, they tend to like put their blood, sweat, and tears into building a great company, whether people love it there or not. Usually there's positives and negatives. But what I found consistently is that answer is usually a really high score. And the way Gallup does it is, a 5 is they strongly agree with that statement, 4 is agree, 3 is neutral, 2 is disagree, and 1 is strongly disagree. And what I always tell people is, you want to see a score of 4.2 or above. And I always find that score is usually a pretty high score. Where they fall off are these other areas around recognition and development and opinions, and and there's obviously some tools you can implement into your business as a manager to. I always say those are tactical. I can do better one-on-ones with your team and ask them questions, help develop them, figure out where they want to go. If you do, like, that's a 20-minute conversation every 30 days. And then go and help them do it. Right.
Yeah.
Like what I found is that's the disconnect, is that the managers tend, to your point, they don't put the oxygen mask on themselves. They come to work and work their tails off. But then their employees see the worst of them. Right. Cause they're
anxious and they're negative and they're intensely worried when, they're just bringing all kinds of negative stuff in a conversation where they're trying to be supportive, but they're not capable of supporting anybody else when they're barely getting through the day.
Right. And that goes to like Maslow, right? Which is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs is you got to take care of survival before you can take care of success.
That's right.
And so what sort of, like, if someone's stuck in that cycle of they really care, but they're not showing up as their best self, and they have a lot of pressure, maybe it's a smaller organization where a lot of things falling on their shoulders, what type of recommendations are you giving to leaders like that so that they can show up and be their best self?
Well, one of the things that with clients, I always spend some focus on, nobody hires me to talk about well-being. I mean, the organizations don't, but increasingly organizations are starting to realize, oh, well-being matters. And so what I've done for years is ask clients to kind of think about what I think of as the four realms of well-being, their physical body, how they're eating, exercising, all of those kind of things. Their emotional self, are they anxious? Are they so stressed that they're not able to function? Or your I think your spiritual self, and that in the context of work, that's the values we're talking about. But the fourth one that not everybody focuses on that I think is so important, and that's your brain and your mindset. It's your physical brain. You got to take care of your brain with exercise and all the things that we've learned recently, but you also need to take responsibility for your positive mindset. But the interesting thing about those pieces of well-being is that no matter where you think your problems are, it doesn't matter where you start addressing the well-being issues. I always suggest you start wherever it's easiest. For a lot of people, that's exercise. For other people, it's taking breaks to do something like meditation. That'd be the spiritual realm. Sometimes learning something new, doing things different, getting variety, kind of expanding your brain that way. If you take a look yourself, if you're the leader and you're realizing, oh my gosh, I'm totally burned out and I'm not much good, identify some things, and you don't have to sweep everything away and start over. You pick some areas where you want to make some progress, and you do a little bit every day. The two biggest things I can say is look for productive ways, creative ways to take a break. It might be a 3-minute meditation or a short walk or whatever it is, but keep learning new things. Those can get you started.
I love that. I did this conscious leadership program called Stagen, which is based in Dallas, Texas. Rand Stagen, it's his institute. But he has a saying. He's a guest. He's done a guest on the show. Rand says, with the leadership goes the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I always repeat that because whenever I'm either talking to friends who are CEOs or entrepreneurs who I'm working with. I tell them, look, like if you want to learn leadership development, the first way to learn it is on yourself. If you want to assume that there's some teacher that's going to magically come in and teach your team, you're wrong. Leadership's about how you show up every day. And to your point, I have a friend who runs a VC funded startup in San Francisco. His name is Marco Gargenta, and Marco does a thing called MEDS, which he rates as MEDS, and MEDS stands for mindfulness, exercise, diet, and sleep. And he's like, how are my meds? Just a question he asks himself consistently. Mm-hmm. So I integrated that into some of my leadership work where I'd say, hey, you should be measuring your meds on a regular basis with yourself, with your team. If you want to have a high performance team, you guys have to show up and be your best selves. And you can't be your best self if one of those four things are off. Like mindfulness is a practice that's probably the last one that people get right because it's hard. We're not taught in Western world to have mindfulness practices. No one taught me when I was in third grade I should meditate. Although I am teaching my children that they should meditate. We're doing 30-second meditations together.
Yeah, many ones.
Exercise is a no-brainer. Like we all were told that from a young age. Diet is a thing that we're told that some people do well, most people don't. But sleep's one of those no-brainers. Like you could get all three of those right. If you didn't sleep well the night before, you're going to feel like garbage today.
That's right.
And you can't show up and be your best self. So I like the meds. I always use meds with people and talk to about meds with them. I'd love, we're kind of rounding the end of the show here. I have one really big question for you, which is,
okay.
And I've found this to be true. Oh shoot! I hit my camera. I found this to be true in different organizations that I've worked with, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So one of the things I noticed when you do a Q12 or is that there's a balance. Q12 being Gallup's engagement questionnaire. It has a lot of questions around what is it that gets people engaged, right? And then there's this idea that you've been discussing around variety and people taking care of themselves. And there's no question those things are important. But I do think that there's a balance between, getting work done and also people taking care of themselves. And I think some organizations, and I think, Silicon Valley's got a bad rap for it, maybe some truth, some just, hyperbole, that people show up and ride their skateboards in the office, and they go to their nap pod and they go get a massage by the company masseuse, and like no real work even gets done. And I've seen in organizations I've worked with, like there's not a lot of accountability. They do a lot of the fun stuff, and they're not a high performing organization. Sure, employees love the company, but like who wouldn't? They work 4 hours a day and they play 4 hours a day. I don't think that's good either.
No.
Because that's a company that probably won't stay in business that long.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. What was?
Yeah, my question is how do you, how do we? I think a lot of leaders that have more of a hardcore mentality around accountability have a tough time with the soft stuff because of what I just said. They're like, they see it as an all or nothing type of proposition. What are your thoughts? And I think Silicon Valley, I think the tech world where they're overly funded kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They celebrate some of this stuff, and it's not totally true, but the perception on the street is that they're doing all the fun things I just said. And the reality is they do that stuff, and then they make them work 8 days in a row. But how do you balance those two? How do I balance having a healthy work environment while still having heavy accountability, while still having, a high performing organization, not just one versus the other?
You spend some time thinking about the nature of the work and encouraging deep work, encouraging that work where you plunge in with the seriousness that you plunge into playing tennis, if tennis is what you love. But you help people learn how to break things into pieces. You can only do deep dives, maybe a couple of hours. So the breaks can help you refresh, but you do it by modeling. You do it as the leader by taking, whether it's a report that you're writing or whatever it is you're inventing, whatever you're doing, you model deep, intense work and you acknowledge it, you notice it, you give positive response when people take the deep dives. I think sometimes you help people by telling them, go back to the drawing board, push people. You can push strong people to step a little bit outside their comfort zone. It's partly teaching, and as a leader, this is tricky, I know. But that's why kind of practicing yourself really matters. Darius, when you're really onto something, when you're really excited about it, when you're really going to go deep, and so you can spot it in other people. And you push them a little bit, or you congratulate them. You create a culture in which intense work is valued. But it's not exploited.
I love that. And do you think that when people are going through those deep, intense periods, is there anything that you do as far as from an intentionality standpoint to program in those periods of break? Is it like, hey, we run hard and then we break hard? Like how do you advise people think about that?
Well, one way to do it, and different methods work for different people, but I think you got to stop thinking of your schedule as a list of meetings. Your schedule is like, this is the former lawyer coming out of me a little bit, but my schedule is my contract with myself for the day. And it needs to reflect my values and the most important things that I want to get done. And so you look at your schedule and you think about, where do you need to put your greatest attention? And you put it on your schedule at the time when you know you have the greatest energy. For a lot of people, it's like mid-morning. That's when you can do your most challenging work. But you put in breaks. You schedule a walk. You schedule coffee with another person that will be fun, so that you're managing how you're putting your energy and not just responding to other people's meeting requests.
I love that. So, guys, what a great show. And Beverly, this has been so fun having you here. I appreciate you taking the time to really talk about this important subject of self-care and finding, if we're going to spend all this time, grinding away and building our careers away from our families, at least that time that we spend shouldn't be a grind, and it shouldn't be time away. It should be time with ourselves and with our coworkers, living a more fuller, purpose-filled life, to your point. So really appreciate you coming on and sharing this information with us.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. Again, the book is Find Your Happy at Work. And I'm excited about this time in our life as a country. I think we are starting to grapple with some important issues, and some good is going to come out of all this.
Most definitely. And so for the book, where can people find the book right now? Is it just where books are sold? Like
everywhere books are sold.
And if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, my website is clearwaysconsulting.com. On Twitter, you can find me at Beverly E. Jones.
At Beverly Jones, is that correct?
Beverly E. Jones.
Beverly E. Jones. Guys,
Yeah.
We'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Well, Beverly, thank you so much. Had such a great time having you on the show. Really appreciate it. And guys, go get the book, Find Your Happy at Work. You can find it where all books are sold. And if you want to connect with Beverly, it's Clearways Consulting. So you're going to want to check her out there.
Yeah. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Beverly. You guys, thank you so much. Have a great day. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.